Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sanova and you're watching A News Now. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Zelensky says Ukraine will work with the United States on peace plan without betraying national interests. Global leaders gathered in Johannesburg for a G20 summit hosted in Africa for the first time. And COP30 summit in Brazil has entered overtime as nations struggle to agree on a draft climate deal. President Volodymyr Zelensky pledged on Friday to work fast and constructively with the United States on a peace plan to end Ukraine's war with Russia, but said he would not betray his country's national interests. In a video statement, he urged Ukrainians to remain united in what he described as one of the most difficult moments in the country's history.
Speaking in a nationally broadcast address, President Volodymyr Zelensky warned that Ukraine is facing what he called one of the most dangerous crossroads in its modern history, a moment where military pressure meets political pressure.
Now is one of the most difficult moments in our history, either the loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner, either the difficult 28 points or an extremely difficult winter, the most difficult, and further risks.
The widely leaked US peace plan includes proposals that Kyiv had previously ruled out, ceding eastern areas it now controls, significantly cutting its army size, and pledging not to join NATO. Still, Zelensky says diplomacy isn't off the table, but Ukrainian sovereignty is non-negotiable. He urged the country, now entering its fourth winter of full-scale war, to stay united.
The national Ukrainian interest must be taken into account. We are not making loud statements. We will calmly work with America and all partners. Stop the quarreling. Stop the political games. The parliament of a warring country must work unitedly. The government of a warring country must work effectively.
As Kyiv weighs diplomatic pressure, Moscow says it has already reviewed the same US proposal and is signaling openness. Speaking to officials, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the document could serve as a legitimate base for ending the war.
I believe it can be used as the basis of a final peaceful settlement, but the US administration has so far failed to secure Ukraine's consent. Ukraine is against it. If Kyiv does not want to discuss President Trump's proposals, then they must understand that the events that took place in Kupiansk will inevitably be repeated in other key areas of the front line.
On the battlefield, the war continues. Russia said late on Thursday that it had taken control of Kupiansk, a large town that straddles the Oskil, but Ukraine denied it had fallen. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia's battlefield progress should convince Ukrainian president to negotiate now rather than later.
US President Donald Trump says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky must approve a US-backed peace plan to end Russia's invasion. Speaking from the Oval Office after meeting New York Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani, Trump called the war a conflict that should never have happened, noting the staggering casualties.
Yeah, we have a way of getting peace. We think we have a way of getting peace. He's going to have to approve it. It's so sad, so many people. You know, last month they lost 25,000 soldiers. This is something, we haven't seen anything like this since the Second World War. And they're averaging 6,000 or 7,000 a week between the two of them, dead soldiers. And it goes on, and I think they're getting reasonably close, but
United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres addressed ongoing global conflicts during a press conference ahead of the G20 summit in South Africa on Friday, commenting reports of a 28-point peace plan for Ukraine backed by President Donald Trump. Guterres said no formal proposal has been presented.
And we need a just, sustainable and comprehensive peace in Ukraine, in accordance with UN Charter, international law, and the resolutions of the General Assembly. First of all, we don't know what the peace plan is. I just read on the papers that Russia has not yet received any peace plan. So we are talking about something that is in the press but was never presented formally by the United States or by any other entity. And so obviously for us, a peace solution for the Ukraine that is in line with these principles would also abide by the resolutions of the General Assembly that have clearly indicated that the territorial integrity of the Ukraine and in general around the world, the territorial integrity of states must be respected.
Leaders of the Group of 20 top economies arrived for a U.S. boycotted summit in South Africa on Saturday, seeking a deal on a draft declaration drawn up without U.S. input in a surprise move that a senior White House official described as shameful.
G20 leaders have begun arriving in South Africa ahead of the summit, which opens on Saturday. The two-day event, held under the motto Solidarity, Equality and Sustainability, will bring together heads of state from 15 countries across Europe, Asia and South America. They are expected to take part in 3 sessions focused on global challenges and priorities, including sustainable economic growth, development and financing. Britain's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has landed in Johannesburg, defending his decision to attend despite the UK budget being only days away. He is also expected to announce a new deal under which the UK will provide strategic advice and consultancy services to South Africa's railways. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has also arrived. Lula is likely to bring to the summit what could become one of the key outcomes of the soon-to-conclude COP30 in Brazil. G20 nations are considered crucial in shaping the global response to climate change, accounting for 85% of the world economy and more than 3/4 of climate warming emissions. Also attending are Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Chinese Premier Li Qiang. Premier Li is scheduled to hold bilateral meetings with several world leaders during the conference. Police and army units staged a show of force earlier in the week, and a hard lockdown came into effect on Friday around the Nasrec Expo Centre and FNB Stadium, where leaders will convene. This year marks the first time a G20 summit is being held on African soil, with South Africa the continent's only member state. The administration of US President Donald Trump has said it will not attend, alleging that the host country, once ruled by a white minority apartheid government until 1994, discriminates against white people. While a US boycott could undercut South Africa's agenda, Pretoria said the absence was Washington's loss and that it still expected a successful summit.
A former British MEP has been jailed for more than 10 years after admitting to accepting pro-Russian bribes, a case that has ignited a political storm in the United Kingdom and raised urgent questions about foreign influence in domestic politics.
A former British politician has been sentenced to over 10 years in prison for accepting pro-Russian bribes. Nathan Gill, ex-leader of Reform UK and Wales and former MEP, admitted taking payments to promote pro-Russian positions in the European Parliament. Between December 2018 and July 2019, Gill received approximately £40,000 from Ukrainian pro-Russian politicians. Prosecutors say he made speeches, tabled motions, and gave media interviews in line with these payments. During interviews with police, Gill refused to comment on his involvement.
You know Oleg Voloshin?
No comment.
Even as investigators pressed him on his links to Oleg Voloshin, a Ukrainian politician involved in coordinating these payments, Gill remained silent. The British Prime Minister says this case underscores the urgent need for transparency within political parties and raises concerns about foreign influence on UK politics.
And I think that demands that Nigel Farage investigate how that happened within his party, and equally importantly, what other links there are between his party and Russia. And that needs that. In fact, he should get up today, he's usually got plenty to say, and say in light of this shocking result with a long prison sentence, to see how serious it is, undermining our interests as a country, he should set up an inquiry, an investigation into his home party. How did that happen on his watch, in his party? And what other links are there between his party and Russia? That's what he should do.
Gill's actions have sent shockwaves through British politics. Reform UK, currently ahead in opinion polls, described his conduct as reprehensible, treasonous, and unforgivable.
US President Donald Trump and New York Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani struck a conciliatory tone on Friday after meeting in the Oval Office, calling the discussion productive despite sharp political differences.
In common, we want this.
US President Donald Trump is meeting New York Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani in the Oval Office, where the two are discussing housing, food prices, and broader affordability challenges facing the city. Trump congratulated Mamdani on his election win, saying they found a lot more agreement than expected, even as the president joked that the mayor-elect's views are a little out there.
Starting with the early primaries against some very tough people, very smart people. And he beat them easily, and I congratulated him. And we talked about some things in very strong common, like housing and getting housing built, and food and prices, and the price of oil is coming way down. Anything I do is going to be good for New York. If I can get prices down, it's good for New York. But I just want to congratulate. I think you're going to have, hopefully, a really great mayor. The better he does, the happier I am, I will say. There's no difference in party. There's no difference in anything. And we're going to be helping him to make everybody's dream come true, having a strong and very safe New York. And congratulations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Despite their heated campaign exchanges, both leaders say they are focused on shared priorities, from tackling crime to easing the cost of living, as they prepare to work together for New York's 8.5 million residents.
Absolutely.
A major emergency was declared at the Port of Los Angeles on Friday night, as 186 firefighters worked to combat a massive and stubborn blaze involving hazardous materials on a cargo ship, authorities said. The blast knocked out power to lighting and cranes, according to the Los Angeles Fire Department. Fire crews say hazardous materials are inside multiple burning containers. Earlier, 6 crew members were unaccounted for, but officials now confirm all 23 have been located and safely evacuated. No injuries have been reported. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass says the situation is being closely monitored, and California Governor Gavin Newsom has been briefed and is coordinating with emergency teams. COP30 has entered overtime as the nations struggle to agree on a draft climate deal, with a major dispute over the future of fossil fuels stalling progress. Talks in Belém extended beyond the scheduled deadline on Friday after nearly 200 countries failed to reach consensus on a text proposed by host nation Brazil. The fiercest debate centers on whether the agreement should include a commitment to phase out fossil fuels. More than 80 countries support the inclusion of a phase-out plan, but oil-producing states remain firmly opposed, leaving negotiators locked in closed-door discussions as they search for compromise.
We are building on what we have agreed 2 years ago, that this world has to have a strategy for lowering emissions, getting down on fossil fuels, and we built on the agreement last year. So EU is not walking away from anything. That's the position.
Well, clearly the oil-producing countries are only trying to focus on adaptation. But adaptation is an empty bag if mitigation doesn't come next to adaptation. Adaptation alone and the finances for adaptation are not sufficient if we don't deal with the problem. The root cause of this problem is fossil fuels. How are we dealing with that? How are we going to come out from this COP to say and to tell the people that we deny the most basic scientific truth, which is that the fossil fuels are the cause of more than 80% of the emissions that are generating climate change? We cannot look at the people and the future generations if we don't do something now. And we cannot accept a text that is not dealing with the real problems.
In Belém, host city of COP30, Brazil is finding new ways to turn the Amazon into a source of sustainable jobs, using its forest products like acai, Brazil nuts and herbs to create income without harming the environment.
As host of the COP30 Climate Summit, Belém is showcasing a new economic model to help locals earn from the Amazon without cutting down forests. Instead of clearing land for cattle or mining, the state of Pará is supporting the production of forest goods like acai, Brazil nuts and herbs for global markets. The state recently opened a $56 million bioeconomy and innovation park near Belém's historic Vero Peso market. The facility provides labs, machinery and training for entrepreneurs to develop foods, cosmetics and other products from Amazon resources. Local businesses, such as artisanal herb producers and acai exporters, have already scaled up, creating jobs and supporting hundreds of families.
Well, the story of Salt is actually very exciting for me because we managed to increase the number of families. I always say this, and I get goosebumps when I talk about it, because when I first entered the bioeconomy park, I saw a great opportunity for us to expand our production capacity.
Acai in particular has seen a market boom. Prices per pot have risen from $3 to $11 and exports to Europe are growing. The park also supports coffee growers who combine organic farming with reforestation, helping small farmers generate income while restoring the forest. Pará Governor Helder Barbalho said the goal is to turn the Amazon's biodiversity into a new economy that reduces reliance on industries that harm the environment.
May we reduce our dependence on extractive economies, on economies based on greenhouse gas emissions, and move toward low-emission economies, toward economies that value living forests.
Brazil hopes this approach will show the world it is possible to protect the rainforest while creating jobs and sustainable wealth for its communities.
Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. A month after the first expert meeting in Yerevan, its reciprocal round is now underway in Baku. And our Deputy Editor-in-Chief Orhan Amashov has more on that.
A month after the first ever self-organized and government-backed bilateral meeting of Azerbaijani and Armenian experts and civil society representatives in Yerevan, Baku is now hosting a reciprocal arrangement. Today, I've spoken to two participants of the second encounter, to Armenian participants of that very encounter, and we discussed a number of issues related to the format of their engagement with Azerbaijani counterparts, the peace process, its key components, and what is to come as long as the next crucial year of 2026 is concerned. Stay tuned.
A two-day roundtable is underway in Baku, bringing together 5 Armenian experts as part of a new effort to deepen civil society engagement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. The initiative follows a reciprocal visit to Yerevan last month and aims to foster dialogue and trust under the emerging peace agenda. To discuss the significance of this roundtable and what it means for the broader normalization process, we're joined by Shabnam Safarova, chair of the Public Union for the Progress of Karabakh, joining us from Baku, Azerbaijan. Shabnam, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Shabnam, how significant is this roundtable for Azerbaijani-Armenian civil society dialogue at this stage of the peace process? And what distinguishes this meeting from previous civil society initiatives between the two countries?
As you mentioned, there were initiatives for organizing the meetings to keep alive, let's say, to keep alive the relations between two civil societies, but it was organized by third parties. And the difference now is that it is hosted on each other's territory. You know, a month ago, Azerbaijani representatives from civil societies, they participated in an event in Yerevan. And it is significant because it is mutual, it is direct, and it tied to a live peace agenda.
Mm-hmm. So how would you describe the atmosphere in Baku during these exchanges?
It seems serious, professional, and carefully respectful, I think, which is very important. And It is a signal of readiness, let's say, in governmental level, in civil society institutional level. It is signal to being ready for moving forward in peace agenda. I mean, the civil society now is trying to support governments in this order.
Shabnam, what are the key themes or concerns raised by the Armenian experts participating in the event?
As I know, there is not any public reporting about this issue, but from the media, from the, let's say, opinion of civil society members from Armenia, we see that these themes or concerns are about security and stability after August peace track. And it is about connectivity and economic cooperation between countries, and for sure about humanitarian matters like post-conflict, legacies, and etc.
And do you see these dialogues translating into tangible contributions to the political peace agenda?
If it will be sustainable and continuing process, yes, it will be very, let's say, important significance in the process of eliminating let's say, bottlenecks in the society, resistance in the society under governments for this process, especially in Armenia.
Shabnam, finally, are there particular challenges participants face when discussing sensitive issues in such forums?
There are big challenges. You know, the first one is emotional and historical memory, because Karabakh issue conflict is not the first conflict that occurring between two societies, two countries. That's why we have very bad emotions, unfortunately, and historical memory that can derail rational discussion process. And as I mentioned before, it is domestic political pressure on both sides, especially in Armenia, and different starting narratives about the conflict, which makes wording delicate, let's say.
Shabnam Safarova, thank you very much for your insights and for joining us today. We appreciate your time and analysis. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Here in Baku, media experts from across the D8 countries have come together to talk about collaboration, innovation and the future of media, while exploring ways to build a stronger, more unified voice in today's fast-changing journalism landscape.
Regular basis, even if virtually through video conference.
We are here at the D8 Media Forum 2025 in Baku. Attendees from all member countries have gathered for the opening sessions where media experts will share insights on key media-oriented topics. Panels, discussions, and network sessions are already lined up for the sake of building momentum and sparking ideas that could actually transform the media scenery among the D8 member states.
The Developing 8 Organization for Economic Cooperation held its media forum, bringing together media leaders and policymakers from Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Nigeria, Pakistan and Turkey to reaffirm stronger cooperation and shared narratives in the media realm. Proposal included cultural exchanges, documentary co-productions, training journalism and media partnerships. The forum also highlighted the D8 Media Excellence Centre, led by Azerbaijan, which will support joint media projects, training, cultural programmes and media research.
And right now, in the heart of the forum, the energy is even more tangible. As we speak, policymakers, senior media representatives, and prominent journalists are taking part in sessions focused on responsible journalism and digital innovation.
Panel sessions addressed global media challenges, digital innovation, fact-checking, and crisis communication. members emphasised a unified media vision and deeper information exchange.
Like you know, D8 is like a committee of nations, and the agenda for this time is how to tackle misinformation, fake news and disinformation at this era of artificial intelligence and fake news, where we have all these things fueling division. But as D8, we are coming together to see what can we do, what strategy can we deploy to ensure that we move forward in terms of information management at an international level.
Well, actually, I think we already achieved a lot. The fact that leading media professionals and officials are meeting in this forum to further boost cooperation, not just in the economic field, but in the information and communication field as a driving force to manage social exchange and delivery of messages.
Building on these achievements, member states are now formalising steps to guide their collective media efforts.
So we just started, and I think I have proposed a Baku Declaration in which we will be able to lay out the guidelines, the rules and the way forward. So hopefully I think it will be very positive.
The D8 Media Forum is fostering innovation, partnership and coordinated communication, paving the way for a cohesive and forward-looking media landscape across member countries.
Mounting concern is emerging from Europe as several EU foreign ministers speak with unusual clarity about Georgia's political direction. Their coordinated remarks reflect a growing divide between Brussels and Tbilisi, yet all emphasize a crucial distinction. The Georgian public's commitment to democracy and Europe remains unquestioned, while the government's recent actions are prompting sharper scrutiny. Our Nini Nikolaishvili has more.
A unified warning from Europe's top diplomats is placing Georgia's political trajectory under a brighter international spotlight. Ahead of the EU Foreign Affairs Council meeting in Brussels, foreign ministers from Latvia, Sweden and France voiced deep concern over what they describe as a decisive shift by the Georgian government away from the commitments it once made on the path toward EU membership. Latvia's Foreign Minister Baiba Braža delivered one of the most direct assessments, stating that Georgia had been moving steadily toward integration before. In her words, its government completely changed the course. She confirmed that Latvia has already designated a number of Georgian officials as persona non grata and reiterated her country's long-standing support for restricting visa-free travel for certain categories of officials, should the EU decide to move in that direction. Sweden's Foreign Minister Maria Stenergard echoed the alarm, underscoring that Georgia is taking very rapid steps against the EU membership. Her remarks placed particular emphasis on supporting Georgian citizens who continue to defend democracy and press freedom, two sectors European officials now increasingly identify as under pressure. France's Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot reinforced that distinction even more clearly. He underlined France's appreciation for the Georgian people's ongoing commitment to freedom and democratic values, while noting that Paris has repeatedly expressed its concerns directly to the Georgian government. The convergence of the statements points to a pivotal moment. European officials are signaling that Georgia's future path will depend not only on public enthusiasm for Europe, which they strongly acknowledge, but also on political decisions taken in Tbilisi. With November 28 marking one uninterrupted year of protests, European capitals are watching closely to see whether this domestic pressure, combined with international concern, will nudge the country back toward the commitments it once championed. The Georgian government has not yet commented on these recent statements. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
In an important development, Afghanistan and Uzbekistan have renewed a key electricity transmission agreement, securing power supplies for 2026 and aiming to stabilize Afghanistan's struggling energy grid. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more details from Kabul.
The renewed deal means Uzbekistan will continue exporting electricity to Afghanistan next year. Afghanistan relies heavily on its neighbors for power, and Uzbek imports remain the single largest source. Right now, Afghanistan produces only a fraction of its own electricity, around 250 megawatts domestically, while it imports more than 70% of its power from countries including Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, and Tajikistan. As a result, millions of residents, especially in Kabul, depend on foreign electricity to keep homes, industry, and hospitals running. But the system is fragile. Power cuts are common, particularly in winter, and only about 1/3 of Afghans are connected to the national grid. Much of the country's transmission network is outdated or incomplete, and disruptions in neighboring states often lead directly to blackouts inside Afghanistan. This agreement aims to ease those problems. Afghanistan's state utility, the Afghanistan Breshna Shirkat, says the new contract will secure electricity for 2026 and support a series of major infrastructure projects already underway. For now, the renewed agreement offers some reassurance that Afghanistan's power supply will continue into 2026. But experts warn that until the country develops more of its own generation capacity, it will remain vulnerable to outages and regional supply disruptions. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Now going back to G20 summit, world leaders are gathering in Johannesburg today for a historic G20 summit, the first ever held on African soil. But the meeting opens under unusual circumstances, with the United States boycotting the event over widely disputed claims about South Africa's treatment of white citizens. Still, leaders are pressing ahead with a full agenda focused on sustainable development, critical minerals, artificial intelligence, and building a fairer global future. Joining us from Johannesburg is John Kavulik, senior editor at Issue Inside. Mr. Kavulik, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm going to apologize in advance. There's a lot of background noise, but also Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, just began to speak and speaking loud. So I apologize. Hopefully you can speak up with asking the questions. I'll do my best.
So let's continue. Mr. Kavulik, let's begin with the atmosphere on the ground in Johannesburg. How is the city receiving this historic G20 gathering, and how significant is it that Africa is hosting the G20 for the very first time, especially for South Africa's global standing?
I think I got most of the question. It's a challenging atmosphere because, of course, President Trump isn't here. A total of 5 of the G19 members are not here. President Trump, President Xi of China, President Putin of Russia, President Sheinbaum of Mexico, and President Milei of Argentina. So it's taken away some of the pageantry and some of the media attention. However, there are some positives, and that is by not having those people here, particularly President Trump and President Xi, it does give the other leaders an opportunity to have more useful dialogue amongst themselves, because they're not all trying to get FaceTime with the President of the United States or the President of China. So it does allow them a little extra room. Unfortunately, though, President Trump, there's a 13th century saying that it's out of sight, out of mind. But in the 21st century here in Johannesburg, it's out of sight, not out of mind, because President Trump is everywhere. Because he didn't just say, okay, I'm not coming because of travel issues or the government shut down or something like that. He just let South Africa have it. And a lot of this stems from the fact that he doesn't have connectivity to race as a grounding factor of his personality. He grew up, and then his business has all basically been white successful people in New York, and some of those Jewish real estate people who are, of course, white too. So he doesn't have a lot of connectivity with blacks, particularly on the African continent. And when he looks at slavery, for example, in the United States, he looks at it from the point of view of the slave owners. Gee, they must have been successful businessmen to own that many people. He understood the fact that it's wrong to own someone. And then you transition to South Africa, and he looks at that and he says, hey, these Afrikaners, these Dutch and German white people, they built South Africa. And then Mandela comes along and the blacks take everything from the white people. He just doesn't have that grounding. And he's, really laying everything about South Africa, and it's depressing, or it's depressed some people here, particularly young people, because they don't understand it. You don't understand, what did we do to this guy? So President Trump circling around. The hope for these leaders is that they're going to be able to leave here tomorrow, and that he won't attack any of them. But we'll see.
Mr. Kavulik, envoys have agreed on a draft leaders' declaration without seeking U.S. consensus. How unprecedented is this?
We do need to work together.
Yeah, the communique has already been adopted by consensus, according to President Ramaphosa of South Africa this morning. The Trump administration made it clear that there shouldn't be a communique because the U.S. isn't agreeing to it, and the South Africans are trying as hosts to sort of balance this with, okay, the U.S. is a member of the G20, but the U.S. it's not that they're here without a president or a vice president or a secretary. They're just not here. And so do you still need the consensus of 19 or 20 or 15 or whatever? And President Trump says, I don't care where I am, I still control this because of my one vote, which is very European Union-esque because they have similar issues that require unanimity. So the communique is not going to be full of a lot of, well, for most people, it won't be controversial. For President Trump, he's going to find something.
Mr. Kavulik, climate change features heavily in the draft declaration. What new without the United States, do you expect the final communique to take a more unified or more fragmented tone? It looks like we have lost connection with our guest. Anyway, we are grateful to him for his insights and for joining us from Johannesburg. You are up to date with World News for the Hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for more.